just to make certain everybody understands my point, this Judge Boasberg, in a very rambling decision at the very near the end on pages 43 and 44, he intimates, more than intimates, that he's going to hold the government in criminal contempt unless they fix the contempt, and that he has to give them the opportunity to do so. And he throws out a few ideas. You don't necessarily have to bring all these Venezuelan gangsters back to America, but you can do this, that, or the other, and you can come up with some creative ideas. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. You may want to hold on to this potential contempt issue, but you have a problem. The Supreme Court said you don't have any jurisdiction. So in order for them to fix, quote unquote, the potential criminal contempt, the government, the administration, the Department of Justice would have to defy the Supreme Court, which ruled in its favor that the jurisdiction belonged, I think it was Texas or Louisiana, but I think it's Texas. So the judge is putting the government in the position where they cannot comply with his fix. Hans von Spakovsky, one of the great lawyers at the Heritage Foundation. Hans, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was just stunned by Boseberg's order because he is defying the Supreme Court, and the person who is acting in contempt is Boseberg. Look, it's not just as the Supreme Court said he didn't have jurisdiction. The claims that were filed by the ACLU on behalf of these Venezuelans, the court said were not valid. Why? Mm-hmm. Because the only way to challenge the Alien Enemies Act is in a habeas corpus petition, and the ACLU didn't have that claim in there. What that means is that the Supreme Court just didn't just overrule his temporary restraining order, which is what he says in the order. They said he never should have heard this case in the first place. Yeah, that means that order that he issued was void from the moment he signed it. So how can he hold them in contempt for not complying, supposedly, with that order? That makes no sense whatsoever.
But they also made the point he has no geographic jurisdiction.
Right.
So that's a double.
Yeah, it's a double. He should have dismissed the lawsuit in front of him the moment he received the Supreme Court's order, and instead he's continuing to have it, even though the case should have been filed down in Texas under a habeas corpus petition.
It's crazy.
Look, here's the other thing. I've heard all these people defending Boseberg. Listen, Mark, when this case first came up, I quickly did some research. It took me 10 minutes to find the relevant case that the Supreme Court cited in its decision, a 1948 case called Ludke v. Watkins, which said the only way you can challenge an action under the Alien Enemies Act is through a habeas petition. That means when Judge Boasberg was holding a hearing that Saturday and then...
Hold on, for the audience. Yeah. There was no habeas petition, correct?
Correct. So that means that Boseberg, and look, it took me 10 minutes to find this case saying this was an invalid lawsuit by the ACLU. Either Boseberg is completely incompetent or he was deliberately ignoring that Supreme Court precedent and defying the court.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. Absolutely outrageous. Then we got another judge in Boston. Here's Joe Biden with executive order. He bastardizes what the parole provision of the immigration laws mean, and you know this. You're an expert on these immigration laws. Twist it into a pretzel. They bring in 530,000 illegal aliens. They solicit them and bring them into the country. Trump says, no, his executive order is I'm removing them all. And this judge says, no, you're not. They get due process.
Yeah, well, the problem with that order is that what Biden did violated federal immigration law. Federal immigration law says that in order to grant the parole that he basically granted, it had to be done on an individualized case-by-case basis. Well, there's no way that there was a case-by-case evaluation.
No, we know for a fact, Hans, that they did not.
Right. So the fact that Biden violated the law makes it very clear that this president can reverse a prior violation by a president of the law. And the idea that, you can only revoke these on an individualized case-by-case basis when they weren't granted that way, again, is just another sign of the kind of rogue, out-of-control judges we have who think that they are the head of the executive branch, not the president.
Let me ask you a question. I've about had it with the moral preening of some of these former federal prosecutors, other people on TV talking about due process rights. What due process rights are they talking about? Full-fledged constitutional due process rights? Some kind of, this is just rhetorical, some kind of lower standard due process rights? And who gets to hear this? We're talking about 10 to 11 million illegal aliens. Those are the new ones. The courts, the immigration courts are already backed up to the tune of several millions. People say they're giving court dates. 95% of them, according to the stats I read, don't even show up. What are these people talking about? That we should now have due process rights of some form. And they don't tell us what kind. For all of these illegal aliens, isn't this really amnesty, since our system cannot process this many people?
Well, anyone who says that aliens illegal in this country have the same judicial due process rights as any of the rest of us, obviously haven't read the Supreme Court decisions on this. Aliens who want to get into the country, aliens who want to re-enter the country, even those who were here before, like Mr. Garcia down in El Salvador, they have no due process rights. The Supreme Court said that in Shaughnessy versus Mezzi. That's a 1953 case, who said that the U.S. government can bar the entry of any alien. They have no right to be in the U.S. Once they're in the U.S., they have to have some due process. But again, the court in that case said it's only the amount of due process that Congress wants to give them, and it can be before an executive or administrative tribunal. Well, that's the immigration courts. And the big thing that everyone is missing, including the judges, for example, in the case involving Mr. Garcia, who he's not a Marylander, he's an El Salvadoran, is that he had his due process rights. He had an immigration court hearing back in 2019 at which he and his lawyers admitted he was in the U.S. illegally. Now, folks keep saying, but the judge said he shouldn't be sent back because he was afraid of a particular gang there, Barrio 18. Well, they're all missing the fact that under federal immigration law, the Attorney General of the United States has the right to overrule any decision of the immigration courts because they're not courts.
No, they're bureaucrats.
They're not even administrative law judges. They're simply agents under the law of the Attorney General. Well, Pam Bondi has overruled that immigration judge, has revoked that withholding order. And by the way, Barrio 18, the gang that this guy was supposedly scared of,
they don't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So they're not even there. So he's gotten all the due process rights he's entitled to under the law. And by the way, the district court judge on this case, here's something else federal law says.
She's a crazy ass. I know that. He is. Yeah.
Yeah. If an illegal alien wants to appeal the decision of an immigration judge that he should be deported, federal law says the district courts have no jurisdiction. He has to go to a federal court of appeal.
All right, let me ask you a question. And this is my grave concern. We're talking about millions and millions of people. How do you give due process rights to millions and millions of people? In other words, how do you process some form of due process rights? It's impossible. We don't have the infrastructure for this, do we?
Well, we don't, and that is a serious problem, one that Congress could easily and quickly...
I don't think easily, Hans. Look, what are they going to do? Hire another 500,000 administrative law judges, or 200,000 or 50,000 or something like that? This takes time. I mean, and by the time all that's done, this administration will be over.
Well, what I'm talking about is taking away the administrative due process rights Congress has given.
Yeah, no, that would be very wise, but good luck getting that through the Senate. You see these clowns, they're going to El Salvador to meet the MS-13 guy, begging for his release. That's how insane this is.
No, that's all very true. But at the very least, there are 1.5 million unenforced deportation orders, at least, sitting at the Department of Homeland Security. Every one of those aliens can be immediately removed from the country.
But for the public, I need them to understand, those are old cases, or older cases.
Right.
It's not the newer cases where all these Biden immigrants have come into the country. The vast majority of them aren't. And so they haven't even taken care of that, the backlog. And we're talking about another 10 million or 5 million or 8 million or 12 million or some millions of numbers. So as a practical matter, how would this work? You give them notice? How are you going to find them? You find them? Where do you bring them? Where do you bring them? Tell me.
Look, I mean, it is a problem, but on the other hand, there are good chunks of them that can be removed, including the 500,000 that can be removed immediately because the president has canceled Biden's unlawfully issued prior executive order.
Mm-hmm. I know what the other side's going to argue, and some left-wing judge might like it. A majority on the Supreme Court might go for it, which is, that's all well and good, but once they're here, they have those rights, even if what Biden did was improper, illegal, unconstitutional, whatever it is. They're here. The government persuaded them to come here. They even gave them an app. They flew them here. And so I'm just telling you what they're going to argue. And so it's not enough to say, okay, well, he shouldn't have done that, therefore get rid of them. See my point?
Well, I do see the point, but
I don't like it.
That argument would have to overcome Supreme Court precedent from the 40s and 50s, and the Supreme Court's going to have to overrule what they've said before.
Mm-hmm. I still can't get my hands around or my head around this idea of due process of any kind for tens of millions of illegal aliens, and that you've addressed the 500 and some thousand. I hope that happens. But the vast majority, if that's the case, they're not leaving. The vast majority of them won't even have a hearing because they won't show up. So I think this has been the plan from day one. Go ahead.
That could be, Mark, but remember, there are lots of things that the government can do to induce self-deportation. In fact, I wrote an op-ed about this a while ago about all the different things that can be done to, for example, make it difficult for them to get bank accounts, do all the things that you have to be able to do to be able to live and work every day. And those things they can do, and I think they can induce large numbers to self-deport.
I think that's great. But I'm trying to deal with this issue of due process. You see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Not alternatives. I'm trying to take it on, right on. People who don't self-deport, obviously, are the issue with respect to due process. People who do, it's irrelevant because they're gone. And you're right. We should encourage as many of the people to do that as possible. But I guarantee you there's still going to be millions of people left behind who are not going to self-deport. I mean, we know that right now.
Yeah, and, we do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there's no one solution to this. There are many solutions, all of which have to be applied at the same time. And the due process rights of these aliens is very limited, and that's something that to the extent they can, Pam Bondi, Secretary Noem have to take advantage of that to try to get out as many of the aliens. There's at least 2 million, I think, they can get out without having to deal with that particular issue.
Mm-hmm. All right, brother. Thank you. You're great. We appreciate it, Hans.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. That's Hans von Spakovsky, Heritage Foundation Senior Legal Fellow. Just terrific.